Friends, welcome to my channel. Before listening to this story, I will ask you to like and subscribe. It's not difficult for you, but it's nice for me, and we're starting. It was a beautiful sunny day. Birds sang, butterflies fluttered, and a streamlet gently murmured over the stones on the periphery. The beautiful flowering and fruit trees stood straight. There were many flowers. In the morning, Eve wandered alone while Adam explored another part of the garden. A voice brought her out of her reverie. "Hello, beautiful, it's a beautiful morning. As always, isn't it?" The snake hissed. "Oh yes, it's very beautiful here. I really like it here. I hope we never have to leave," she told him. "Hey, have you ever tried this?" Snake asked, handing her a beautiful apple. "No, we are not allowed to eat the fruits of the tree of knowledge. God said that we can eat the fruits of any other tree, but not this one," she said. "But not only is it very tasty, but if you eat it, you will know as much as God. In fact, you will practically become a god yourself. God is not here now and he will never know. What harm can it do?" Somewhere east of Omaha, 2022. It was a beautiful sunny Saturday morning. Kenny Richardson had 2 more parts of his yard to finish. He was sweating in his t-shirt, but he was smiling broadly. He liked the look of his lush dark green lawn, especially after the haircut. Although he could have easily afforded to buy a garden tractor, he liked the flat surface provided by a non-self-propelled lawnmower much more. He grimaced when he saw an Apex courier truck pull up to his curb. His wife, Callie, has gone grocery shopping, which means that he will have to interrupt his haircut for a long time to sign for the parcel or envelope that the courier brought. He hated to stop mowing before he was done. "Dude, what an impressive herb you have," the courier said as Kenny approached him. "Yes, all premium blue. No more of this mixture of shit that everyone is pushing. I don't mind the rye part, but I hate the thin-leaved oatmeal. The fescue is the damn cousin of the creeping weed," Kenny said. "What do you have here for me?" "Well, actually it's for your wife, but you can sign it if you show me your ID," the courier said. Kenny took his driver's license out of the pocket of his shorts. The courier took a picture of him, thanked him, and handed Kenny an envelope. Kenny looked through it and, without opening it, brought it into the house, after which he returned to the street and finished mowing, just as his wife drove up to the house. "I'll bring the bags. There's an envelope on the table for you that was delivered a few minutes ago by some fancy courier," Kenny said. Kenny took 4 steps from the car to the kitchen table, bringing groceries into the house. When he put down the last package, he found that his wife of 35 years had sat down on the sofa in the living room and was sobbing softly, looking at several pieces of paper. "Is someone dead, baby?" Kenny asked. Callie looked up from her papers and tried to speak, but no sound came out of her mouth. Kenny hadn't seen that look on her face since she found out about her mother's death a few years ago. He sat down next to her on the sofa, wrapped his arms around her body, and hugged her tightly. They sat in this position for several minutes until Callie's tears finally subsided. "Ian Ross died yesterday," Callie whispered faintly. Kenny knew that his wife was close to her former boss, but he was surprised by the extent of her grief. They had worked closely together for about 10 years, but had not seen each other since Kenny and Callie moved to Charlotte, North Carolina from Phoenix, Arizona, about 10 years ago. Kenny knew that he was probably not the most sensitive person in the world, but this level of grief for his former employer seemed excessive. Kenny quickly remembered how Callie had worked for Ian. She had always considered him an impeccable gentleman and an excellent mentor. He recalled that a couple of years before their move, she worried about him after the death of his longtime wife, but apparently he had coped with his grief and malaise by the time Kenny and his wife moved, when Kenny got a big promotion. "I need to get back to Phoenix for the funeral. It'll be in 3 days, Callie said. "Do you need to go to the funeral?" Kenny asked. "Is it necessary?" Callie looked straight into her husband's eyes. They had been together long enough for him to see the real anger in them. "Yes, I have to go," she muttered. "Well then, we have to go," Kenny said. "If he's that important to you, then it's our business." If Kenny expected his wife to be pleased with his statement of support, he was mistaken. She continued to stare at him. "You don't need to come with me. I'm already a big girl. I've traveled alone before," she said. "Even one went to Phoenix to visit Joni." "I know you don't need me to come with you. I just want to go with you," Kenny said. "Whatever you say," she murmured. "So you got a courier notification of your old boss's death the day after it happened?" "Isn't this too unusual?" Kenny asked. He did not receive an answer to this question. Phoenix, 2012. I'm really worried about Ian, Callie told the women gathered around the table at the elite Italian restaurant Mastriani's. It's been 3 months now, and he's still worried about Anna's death. I understand that grief doesn't have a schedule, but it's even starting to affect the company. He's made some bad decisions lately that I don't think he would have made in the past. Callie served as vice president of reinsurance at Phoenix General Insurance. Ian was the CEO of the company. Callie worked at the company for 22 years, gradually moving up the career ladder. For the past few years, she has been a lifesaver for Ian in the reinsurance department. Maybe it's time for you to make more personal contact with the boss, Joni Caputo, Ian Ross's personal administrator, giggled. He's always been partial to you, and it's not like you've never noticed him peeking up your skirt before. All 4 women at the table giggled like 15-year-olds. They all admired their boss, and all had to admit that he was handsome and still in shape for his 60 years. So we're putting you forward as a personal sacrifice for the collective good, Chandra Ferguson announced. Undo the extra button on your blouse, shorten skirts and dresses by another couple of centimeters, bend over a little more than usual, and maybe from time to time lean your big breasts against his hand. Yes, and we will cover for you in front of other employees to minimize suspicion, added a 4th woman, Elvira Anderson. After all, this is an act of compassion, and we don't want anyone to get the wrong impression. All 4 clinked glasses and went back to eating. A week later, Callie invited Ian to lunch for the first time. The blouse was unbuttoned 1 button more than usual, and there was a white bra underneath. She was openly flirting with a man, and by the time lunch was over, it seemed to her that there was a piece of the old Ian in him. He spent most of lunch staring at my blouse. At some point, he reached out and took hold of my shoulder. Yes, he's going to be the same Ian again soon, Callie told the other women at lunch a few days later. I don't think it will be for at least a month. Men are really very simple, Joni laughed. Show off your boobs, maybe give a peek under your skirt, expose your legs more. Anything is better than a visit to the doctor about what is bothering them. All 4 women smiled and nodded. This time, Ian invited Kelly to lunch next Tuesday. She was wearing a tight-fitting silk dark green dress, and when she left for lunch, 2 extra buttons were unbuttoned at the top and 2 more at the bottom. The dark green frilly bra was clearly visible, as was the top of the stockings when she bent at the right angle. Oh, you look sexy, baby, Elvira said softly as Callie walked past her desk on her way to the elevator. Callie winked at her as she passed, followed by Ian. Elvira smiled as Ian reached out and gently patted Callie as he followed her into the elevator. She smiled at him. The following week, Ian invited Callie to lunch again and then to dinner. The following Thursday, when she left for work, Callie took her overnight bag and a bag of clothes to the car. Her husband always left for work before her, and she knew she could hide her clothes in the trunk of her car until a more convenient moment to bring them into the house. She thought about her husband for the first time, planning to help her boss overcome grief and depression. Callie had no doubt that she cherished her husband, Kenny, very much. He is her soulmate, a wonderful husband and father. They met in their freshman year at Arizona State University and got married a year after graduation. Kenny is a certified public accountant and makes good money. Together with him, Callie raises 2 children, goes on vacation, and is going to grow old together. In due time. Callie knew that Kenny trusted her completely, and this would play a huge role in the implementation of her plan to help Ian. Kenny wouldn't stick his nose where he shouldn't, and Callie knows she's smart enough to keep her relationship with Ian separate from life with her husband. Ian knew that Callie was married, so he had to invite her to a restaurant located in the distance. In his corner of the world, there are more than enough establishments designed for people with his income level and who want to maintain confidentiality. They had a very nice dinner and had a great conversation. Back at his game, Ian was handsome and charming, chivalrous and slightly playful at the same time, and Callie knew for sure that her boss was taking her to his bedroom. She followed him willingly. Ian looks as fit without clothes as he does in them, especially for a 60-year-old man, Callie thought. He seemed to appreciate her choice of a black corset and matching panties very much as he slowly and sensually undressed her. Ian warned Callie that he probably wouldn't last long the first time, since he and his late wife hadn't had sex in a long time, but he took a small blue pill, so he'd have enough for a couple of rounds. At the moment he was saying this, her mouth was full, so she could only moan approvingly. Soon he released the first portion of the liquid, and Callie swallowed every last drop, as she usually did for her husband. They exchanged kisses and hugs for about 30 more minutes before Callie felt Ian's penis begin to come to life. She took her nipple out of the man's mouth and slid down the bed to stimulate this revival. After that, they made passionate love, starting from the missionary position and then switching to the cowboy position, Callie's favorite position, since in it she herself could impale on the manhood of a partner. In each position, she brought the matter to an end once. For 10 minutes, Callie lay on top of Ian, burying her face in his shoulder and cooing with pleasure. It was amazing, Ian, she purred. I wouldn't mind spending a few more evenings here. Or maybe in another place. What is it? He asked gently. Maybe in another if it can be arranged, she replied confidently. Callie took a shower and changed into the clothes she wears to work. She told her husband that she would stay late at work and would be home by 9, and at least she was right about the time. Kenny ordered pizza for dinner. The box with the few remaining pieces was in the kitchen, and Kenny was sitting in the living room drinking his 4th beer of the evening when Callie came into the house. She walked up to Kenny and gave him a quick kiss on the lips. Have you eaten? I left you some pieces, Kenny said. I made an order at Orzo's. I was eating a Greek salad, Callie replied. Yes, thanks for brushing your teeth. You know how much I hate the taste of chicken feta, he said. You're welcome, she replied, turning away and rolling her eyes. In addition to Ian's shower, Callie also brushed her teeth, although she was sure that her husband would never be able to taste the remnants of liquid in her mouth. Callie went upstairs to change into comfortable home clothes. Downstairs, she took her usual place on the couch opposite Kenny's folding chair. Sitting and watching some nameless NBA match, she admitted to herself that she really enjoyed the evening with Ian, and she didn't feel guilty at all. She did not love her husband less and did not take anything away from him, she concluded. During the week, Ian and Callie alternated between long lunches and dinners, changing the days of the week for each time. Each meal ended with sex, once at lunch and twice at dinner. As far as Callie and her 3 accomplices could understand, no one else was aware of what was happening. Callie didn't often have to go on business trips, but when she needed to, Ian went with her, although she forgot to tell Kenny about this little detail. Hiding from prying eyes for 5 days, the couple could have become husband and wife by all accounts, and in fact that's how they were registered at the hotel that Ian chose. In fact, the trip lasted a couple of days longer than was necessary. Ian and Callie spent those 2 days enjoying Miami and each other. Among the activities the couple enjoyed was a day on a naked boat. At first, Callie resisted when Ian started to take off her swimsuit, as there were other boats nearby, but Ian quickly changed her mind, starting to kiss her, running his fingertips over the lips of her vagina inside the bikini. Soon she began to kiss him even harder. Soon her skin-tight bikini was on the deck of the boat, and a few minutes later, Callie was already leaning back on the seat cushions, wrapping her legs around Ian's torso. While they were making love, 2 more boats sailed past, making beeps in approval of their actions. Callie blushed and giggled when she opened her eyes to see Ian waving back at them, continuing to make love. I hope we don't run into these people at the restaurant tonight. I could die of embarrassment, she said. During the 2 subsequent trips, Callie learned that Ian likes to have sex in a few risky places. He took her into the fitting room of an expensive boutique in Boston, noting that he had done the same to his late wife a few years ago. The saleswoman winked at Callie when she made the purchase, and that evening Callie wore the dress to dinner, but left it at Ian's at the end of the trip. She found Ian's gruff playfulness charming, and her feelings for him continued to grow. Although she didn't want to admit it to herself, her mission of compassion had long since ended. You're not thinking of leaving Kenny, are you? Joni asked bluntly when a group of 4 women were having lunch a couple of months later. It's quite obvious that the boss has come back to himself, but there seems to be a problem between you. Something. Callie didn't really voice the fact that her relationship with Ian had become more than compassion. It seemed to her that if she didn't talk about it, then it doesn't change. But even so, she still didn't feel that her actions had any effect on her marriage. Of course I'm not going to leave Kenny, she said seriously, as the other 3 women listened intently. But Ian? Well, Callie has never called her relationship with Ian an affair, either with other women or with herself. She called it a relationship all the time. She believed that an affair was nothing more than vulgar love, and that what she and Ian had was something more, although it did not reach the level of love for her husband. After several months of dating Ian, Callie refused him nothing. She did not hesitate when he first asked for passionate love, although in a quarter of a century of their marriage, she had only given herself to her husband twice. She liked that Ian was very enthusiastic, and she knew that she would give him again when he asked. "Damn it, how tight is it, woman?" He grunted. Callie was glad that Ian had the sense to liberally lubricate his penis with Astroglide. Her grimaces gradually gave way to strained smiles, and then wide smiles as they made love longer. How long their relationship would have lasted is anyone's guess, but a little more than a year after the beginning of the relationship, circumstances took over when the director who headed the Deloitte & Touche office in Charlotte, North Carolina, had a heart attack, and those in power decided that Kenny Richardson deserved a promotion to this position. Kenny was pleased with the promotion, although the short notice created a small problem for Callie and for him. Callie could work at her firm's office in Charlotte, but she had to stay another month until life in Phoenix for the Richardsons got better. Deloitte immediately bought the Richardson house, but it took time to replace utilities, store furniture, and other usual chores. Callie didn't really want to move, but she understood that Kenny's promotion was a serious career move with serious consequences for their salaries and lives. She had no choice but to agree, especially since she could work in Charlotte. When Kenny left for Charlotte, Callie was able to make sure that her last month with Ian was special, which she did, practically moving in with him. By the time Callie left for Charlotte, there was almost nothing left undone between her and Ian in the love plan. When she boarded the plane, she walked a little cautiously. She hoped that her husband would be so happy to see her that he wouldn't notice if she didn't feel as comfortable as usual for a few days. It didn't take long for Callie to figure out that she could visit Ian once a year, telling her trusting husband that she was going to Phoenix to stay with her best friend Joni for a week. Ignorant Kenny, as Callie began to call him, readily agreed. Phoenix, 2022. Joni and her husband Stan met Callie and Kenny at the airport. Kenny noticed that Joni raised her eyebrows at his wife before they hugged. He did not see his wife's answering expression. Joni turned to Kenny and hugged him, insincerely, as it seemed to the man. Kenny and Stan shook hands. "It's been a while, bro. How are you?" Stan asked. Kenny gave an evasive answer. Before he and Callie moved in, he had already met Callie's close friends and their husbands several times and always felt out of place when these couples got together. "What a great guy you are," Joni said, "coming all this way to support your wife. You've been dating Ian for how long? Several times. At Christmas parties and maybe at a barbecue? This is what you do for your spouse, isn't it?" Kenny said, catching Joni's negative vibes. Joni and Stan took the couple to a restaurant where they were joined by two more of Callie's friends and their husbands. Upon seeing Callie's husband, both Chandra and Elvira expressed surprise. Kenny even looked down to make sure his fly was buttoned, or that he hadn't spilled anything on his clothes earlier in the day. Over food and drinks, the conversation between the couples went on quite easily, although Kenny noticed that from time to time he caught the silent glances of women. After finishing their meal, Joni and Stan drove Callie and Kenny to the hotel and said they would pick them up the next day to take them to say goodbye to the body. "Tomorrow at the funeral home, you'll probably remember some of the old gang, but it's been a long time. I understand if you don't want to go tomorrow and just do something of your own. Maybe you can rent clubs and play golf with one of your old friends," Callie said. "No, like I said, I came here for you," Kenny said with an exasperated sigh. Ian Ross has been a big man in Phoenix for many years. He had many business contacts and friends. There was a long queue at the funeral home to say goodbye to the body. Kenny guessed that the three people in front of the coffin, a man, a woman, and a child, were most likely Ian's daughter with her husband and son. He had never met Ian's daughter and doubted that his wife knew her well either. She had never talked about her at all in all her years at Phoenix General Insurance. Kenny was incredibly surprised when Ian's daughter flushed and rushed into Callie's arms, noticing the woman when Callie's group approached the family. The two women hugged each other tightly and buried their heads in each other's hair. "I didn't think you'd come," the woman cried in Callie's ear, and Kenny heard his wife's soft whisper, "Shh, not now." A woman in her 40s recoiled from Callie, raising her eyebrows, then quickly lowered her eyes and cleared her throat, then looked up again. "Jackie, this is my husband Kenny. He came with me to keep me company on the trip and to pay his respects to your father. They met several times during the years that I worked in Phoenix." "Thank you for coming," the woman said hesitantly, then held out her hand and introduced her husband and son. Kenny gently shook her hand, trying not to squeeze it as hard as usual. He expressed his condolences and shook hands with the man and the boy, while Callie and Jackie talked quietly for a few minutes. After the funeral, Jackie invited them, along with the other 3 couples, to her father's house for sandwiches and salads. "I didn't know you were that close in the past, but judging by the way she greeted you, you know her well," Kenny told his wife as they returned to the car with Joni and Stan. "We have met several times over the years. There was nothing else. She was a good kid. About 10 years older than the 2 of us," Callie said, quickly turning to the window to end the conversation. After the funeral and burial, about 25 people gathered at Ian Ross's house, eating sandwiches and helping themselves to soft drinks. Callie and her 3 companions were in the kitchen, arranging the food. Kenny was leaning against the doorway, calmly sipping a Crown Royale, when he heard Elvira ask if there was a tray of pickles and olives. "The second cabinet to the right of the sink," Callie replied, laying out 2 types of bread for sandwiches. Kenny was trying his best not to choke on the Canadian whiskey when he turned and quietly left the room, unnoticed by the women. He may be ignorant, but he's certainly not stupid. His wife could only know where the pickle tray was kept for one reason. Suddenly feeling sick, Kenny practically staggered out into the backyard of the house. That's where Stan found him 20 minutes later. "Are you all right, buddy?" "You don't look well," Stan said, and took a sip of the beer he was holding in his hand. "Yes, I'm fine," Kenny replied quietly. "By the way, I want to thank you for all the times you let Callie stay with you when she came to visit." Said Stan, before he realized he'd been tricked. "No problem. She never caused any trouble." "She's good at that," Kenny said with a wry smile. Suddenly, I wanted another drink. At some point after lunch, Jackie took Callie by the elbow and led her into her late father's office. Left alone, the younger woman hugged the older one. "I'm so glad to see you, Callie. So glad you came," Jackie chirped. "Dad would be so glad that you came. I just didn't expect to see your husband with you. He doesn't know yet, does he?" "No, he doesn't," Callie replied. "I did everything I could to keep him at home, but he insisted that he needed to come with me. Men. You have to love them because you can't kill them." Both women laughed heartily. "I know your husband will never understand this, but you helped Dad a lot after Mom died. He was lost. And then you had such a good time together over the years," Jackie said. "I understand that you had to leave with Kenny, but Dad missed you very much. He hasn't had a steady woman since you left. He lived for the weeks when you came home." "It's always been a great week," Callie said sadly. No one noticed that Kenny was silent on the way to the hotel, and then the next morning when Joni and Stan took Kenny and Kelly to breakfast before their flight back to Charlotte. In fact, Callie just didn't notice that her husband had changed in any way until the plane was halfway home. "You're kind of quiet. Everything is fine?" "What is it?" she asked. "It's not even close to okay, but I'm sure you don't want to find out about it somewhere over Oklahoma, do you?" Charlotte, 2022. Callie blushed deeply and turned away from her husband as her brain began to sort out the answers. She soon realized that the answers would have to wait until she got home. They got into their car before Callie tried to figure out exactly what her husband knew. "I don't know what Stan told you, but it's not true," Callie said. "Stan didn't tell me anything." "You did it," Kenny said. "Me? What are you talking about?" the woman exclaimed, showing genuine confusion and more than a hint of anger. "You and your friends were in Ross's kitchen cooking when someone asked where the tray of pickles was, and you didn't even hesitate. It's hardly a wild coincidence, baby," Kenny growled. "I may be ignorant, but I'm not stupid. So later, when I thanked Stan for putting up with you during your visits, he didn't understand what I was talking about, although I did a pretty good job bluffing for you. So the only question is, how long did this affair last until we moved in and it turned into a week-long free pass for you over the last 10 years? Kenny was busy watching the road, so he didn't notice the sour expression on his wife's face. However, she was an intelligent woman and quickly joined the fight, so to speak. "It wasn't an affair, Kenny. I would call it a relationship. It was compassion, baby. 3 months after his wife's death, Ian became very ill, and I felt that I had to do something to bring him back to the real world. Yes, I had some feelings for him. He was a really great guy. But it wasn't love like you and me. Most of all, I tried to show him that he still has something to offer. And I gave him hugs, closeness, and support," Callie said. "What? Come on, repeat it," Kenny shouted. "You didn't have an affair because you made love to him out of compassion? Was I born yesterday? If you feel sorry for a guy, buy him a damn escort or a golden retriever. According to my calculations, you made love to him for over a year, and then you came back and gave him a week of intense love every year after we moved in. By any other calculation than yours, it turns out that you were a damn cheater. No, I didn't love him the way I love you. Stop it, she screamed. You've been making love to him for over a year, and she stopped just because we moved, he said. And then you lied to me, spending a week in his bed every year as a married couple. You know where everything is in his house. I assume Joni, Chandra, and Elvira know about this, as well as their husbands. And probably Ian's daughter and her family, judging by the way she greeted you when we arrived. It seemed to me that this was too much for a man who was just a bosom friend. Compassion? You weren't very compassionate to me, your husband, when you made love to him, were you? No, it wasn't like that, she objected. He needed it so much, he needed someone, he needed me, and I was there for him. I am proud that I helped him. Even in the dark of the car, Kenny could feel the smugness oozing from his wife. He knew, I just knew, that she considers herself much smarter than her husband, because she was able to keep her infidelity a secret for so long. Kenny only had to keep his secret for a week. On the second Monday, Callie received the divorce papers, and in the evening, when she returned from work, she was caught by a bailiff. Kenny, thanks for not handing me the paperwork at work, but we're not getting divorced because of what happened 10 years ago, Callie snorted. Oh, so you don't think that these week-long hookups over the past 10 years are considered cheating? Kenny quipped. He's dead, Kenny, Callie said. You didn't know anything until a couple of days ago. I didn't take anything away from you if you didn't even know about it. Kenny sighed. He had a whole week to think about it, and he mentally figured out what approach Callie would use. Let me save you some time, Cal. It was simple love. He meant nothing to you. I need to forget about it because it's all about my wounded and bruised ego. This is all? He said. Callie looked down at the floor. I didn't expect Kenny to be so carefree, at least in words. She could tell from his eyes that he wasn't as carefree as he seemed. I'm sorry that I hurt you. I didn't want you to find out about this, Callie said. He was dead inside. All this was done in order to bring him out of a difficult state after the death of his wife. We met, had lunch, and had dinner. The closer they got, the more he came out of his shell. Love. It became a natural extension of our friendship, our closeness to each other. It was love out of compassion, nothing more. A whole year of love out of compassion? It sounds like a novel to me. Making love secretly for a week once a year? It sounds like a novel to me, Kenny said. It was a mistake. Stop it, she screamed. No, the mistake could have been a one-time connection. What you had was an affair, a full-fledged novel, he replied. If it wasn't an affair, why did you keep going to see him? Callie's mouth opened and closed twice, but no sound came out. She cleared her throat. Ian was a wonderful person. I believe I helped him. I enjoyed spending time with him. It wasn't just about love, she said. Wonderful men don't sleep with other people's wives, even if they are depressed. He knew you were married. I could have turned you down, Kenny said. How could you even think that what you're doing is acceptable? You were a married woman. What you gave him, you took away from me. The intimate relationship you provided for him was mine. You promised me. Just me. All my intimacy when we got married. You lied to me and broke your oath, but you don't seem to have any remorse. What did I do to deserve such disrespect? It wasn't disrespectful. I was helping him out of a difficult situation, Callie objected. Well, yes, of course, Kenny spat out. You say virtue, and I say cheater. Callie recoiled as if she'd been slapped. Although she did not expect to be caught, she certainly did not think that Kenny would turn away from her so much. After all, they've been married for 25 years. Such love, of course, must mean something, she thought, but apparently she was wrong. Callie quickly found herself a lawyer who got a judge to rule that the couple must undergo 12 mandatory marital counseling sessions. She hoped that the presence of a consultant would make Kenny listen to her arguments about helping Ian. Sometimes hugging and communication are just as important as love, Callie said at the beginning of the first session. After the death of Ian's wife, he needed someone's warmth, and I didn't see anyone who could help him. And that's when you decided it had to be you, that our marriage had to take the hit so that Ian could heal. You traded our marriage for Ian, Kenny raged. No, it wasn't like that, Callie replied. He was devastated. I was just a good friend. You are my wife. From my point of view, it is forbidden to comfort a friend by spreading his legs. You should have refused too, like a good wife, he said. This was not part of my plans, but as our relationship developed, it became part of them. I started to have feelings for him. Of course, not the ones I feel for you, but the feelings, sort of. I'm not a cheater. I couldn't just sleep with him if I didn't care about him, she said. So you say you are not a cheater, and all the evidence suggests otherwise, Kenny chuckled. Did the others know? How did you get appointed his healer? Kenny asked at the second consultation. Callie looked down at the table and picked at her fingernail. We've all been talking about it nonstop, she explained. I was the closest to him, so it seemed like it was my responsibility. The others had to cover for me so that no one else would know what was going on. It was better for me, Ian, and the company. Is it that simple, eh? Said Kenny, slowly shaking his head. Even if it's bad for me. But then again, apparently I don't count. Was I even fourth on that list? I love you, and I always have. I love you as much as I did the day I married you, Callie said. It's not about you. It's not about you or me. It was about what Ian needed, and it was outside of our marriage. This is nonsense, and you know it, Kenny growled, getting up from his chair at the table. You've unilaterally stepped outside of our marriage, so of course you're trying to use this nonsense now. You put the other one above our marriage. You didn't leave all the others, even though you made such an oath to me. But I was saving him, she said hesitantly. So how do you understand all those times when you made love to him after you saved him? Then what is the meaning of all these trips to Phoenix? Your relationship, as you call it, was nothing more than an excuse for being a cheater, he accused. I wasn't a cheater, Callie exclaimed. Why don't you see it? It wasn't about love. He's just a small part of it all. But that everything was wrong. Love and everything else, Kenny said. You cheated on me for over a year. More than 10 years, actually. It's over between us, Cal. Kenny nodded to the consultant and left the room. Mrs. Richardson, regardless of your motives, practically meet the definition of emotional and amorous infidelity, and your husband has made it very clear that he will never agree with your point of view. I'm afraid I'm going to have to stop these sessions, the consultant said. How could you just leave me after 25 years? Callie shouted at her husband when he returned from work at the end of the day. Does our history, our love for each other, mean nothing to you? I could have asked you the same questions if I'd known you were cheating on me with that bastard, Kenny shouted back. Does your love for me mean so little to you that you can cheat on me so easily? And do not say that this is not treason. If you had any kind of intimate relationship with him, then this is treason, which means you're a cheater. The couple's 2 children were unhappy with their parents. Both said they understood their father's point of view, but Molly's daughter repeatedly tried to convince him to take his mother's side, until, in one of the FaceTime conversations, Kenny asked his son-in-law if he agreed with his wife to do what Callie did. Molly and Daniel didn't really discuss Callie's infidelity, believing that the other would support their feelings. No way, Dad, said the son-in-law. If my wife tries to do this shit with another man in a second, her ass will be kicked out of this house. Daniel? Molly exclaimed in shock. What, Molly? He replied. Even before the wedding, we discussed infidelity, emotional and otherwise. She cheated, Moll. The end of the story. And you're doing this shit. And every time you defend her actions to your father, I worry about us, Molly. No, Daniel, I would never. I didn't do that to you, Molly said. Yes, and your father never thought your mother would do that to him either, Daniel said. The couple's son, Jerry, did not hide that he was upset about his mother. The first thing he did after Kenny told him about the divorce was to call his mother and swear at her for several long minutes. Damn it, Mom. How could you do this to Dad? And with us? You're ruining the family, Jerry said. It's not like your father said. Callie tried to argue. It's not just about love. I was helping someone. Did you help someone or not, but you slept with someone besides Dad, right? Jerry asked. Jerry noted to himself how loud the silence on the phone was getting. It lasted for several seconds before he heard his mother switch off. Kenny and Callie continued to live in their house together, but slept in separate bedrooms, and the divorce was slowly moving forward. Callie and her lawyer questioned everything to slow down the process. She was sure that eventually her husband would look at things from her point of view, or at least love her enough to look at things from her point of view, and they would continue to live as a married couple. However, over time, Kenny began to communicate with her less and less, and this did not give her peace of mind. Do you remember how we always talked about how we would travel the world as we got older and find adventures together? Callie asked one evening as they sat in the living room watching TV. Are you really going to give it up for a lonely life in a small apartment, sitting alone, just because of something that happened 10 years ago and did not affect your life in any way? If you hadn't found out about this through my obvious carelessness, we wouldn't have divorced and would still be planning our travels. Why can't you come down from heaven to earth so that we can choose the first option and grow old together? Why couldn't you have thought about it before you had an affair? Why should I eat shit because you spread your legs? Kenny asked. A month later, Kenny called Joni. He was surprised by this, but he knew that she was calling in an attempt to get him to reconsider his decision to divorce her best friend. She loves you, Kenny. You know that, Joni said. The relationship with Ian was for the sake of helping him. He was so depressed. If he needed help so badly, why didn't you or Chandra or Elvira help him? Why Callie? He asked. Damn, why didn't he go to a therapist? The silence on the line told Kenny that Joni was trying to come up with an acceptable answer. After a 10-second pause, she finally answered. It's the closest to him. Personally, we all knew that. She stepped in and did what had to be done, Joni said. It was Kenny's turn to shut up as he thought about it. Tell me, Joni, would you trust Callie to be alone with Stan for a few days? What is it? He asked softly. Of course, she's my best friend. She would never harass Stan, she replied confidently. You and her constantly tell me that she loves me, but that didn't stop her from cheating on me, her husband. If she could cheat on me, then why can't she cheat on you, or others? It was Joni's turn to be silent again. Damn, she finally muttered. Thanks for listening. Charlotte, 2023. Kenny was amazed that Callie didn't seem to understand the depth of her offense to him. Even begging her husband to give up the divorce, she continued to insist that her act for Ian was good and did not affect her marriage to Kenny. If you hadn't found out, we would still be married. We would still be in the Garden of Eden, she remarked during their last meeting before the divorce. Phoenix, 2023. After the divorce, Callie returned to the company's office. She lived alone in an apartment, not considering it necessary to spend money on a house. She occasionally got together with 3 old friends, but rarely received invitations to spend time with any of them at their home. She never felt such a connection with her friends again, as before the move, before the divorce. She still couldn't figure out why Kenny didn't see her relationship with Ian as anything but cheating. I didn't take anything away from him. What could it hurt? She often asked her friends.